Why are books so slippery? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Now today's video is going to be part 2 of my extensive book haul. Now if you haven't watched part 1 of my book haul, I will link it down below so that you can go ahead and do that before you watch part 2. Although you don't need to watch part 1 before part 2, you can feel free to watch part 1 after you're done with this one. But I just wanted to break this up into 2 parts because I didn't want the videos to be super long, and I thought 2 smaller videos would be a lot better than 1 huge video. So I'll be talking more about the books that I bought during the quarantine season. The first 2 books I got were from a trilogy, and I got the first and the second book, and that is Graceling and Fire. These are supposed to be oldies but goodies. I have never read either of them before, but they do have some pretty decent ratings on Goodreads, and I've heard a lot of booktubers talk really well about them, but I've never myself gone into them. Now I know a little bit about Graceling, but not too much about Fire. I know that in Graceling, the main character has a power that is very strong and is a bit of a burden to her. She's not a fan of the power that she has, and she befriends a prince, and from there she learns kind of the secret, or a secret, about her power, and the story goes from there. So that to me sounds really intriguing, and I'm very excited about Graceling. I hear that Fire is even better than Graceling and has to do with a character that has another power, which is a powerful power of reading minds, and the story kind of goes from there. I don't know a lot about it, but again, if you've seen my previous book haul, you'll know that I don't love knowing too much about the books that I'm about to read, because that helps me get into the story a little better. The next book that I have here is a booktube favorite. It is Near Witch by one of the darling authors on booktube, V.E. Schwab. Now V.E. Schwab isn't actually a booktuber herself, but she is raved about all over booktube and all over bookstagram. Everyone loves her, and she is a fantastic writer. I haven't read too many of her works, but I want to read Near Witch as one of the next ones that I read from her collection, because I've heard that it is, I think, her first published work, or her first novel that she wrote, and I kind of want to see the progression of her work over time. I've heard that she's an amazing storyteller, so I think any book that she writes probably will captivate my attention. The next book is a popular one on booktube, and it is not a fantasy novel, but it is fiction. It is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I have heard so much about this book, and I in fact was supposed to read it during the month of March, but never got my hands on it in time to read it, so I'm going to read it in the next coming months. I have heard really good things about this. It is about a girl who investigates the murder of another girl who was murdered, and who the police think that they've caught the suspect, but she goes into the investigation a little more deeply, and from there I guess she might discover that perhaps it's not the person that everyone thinks it is. So I'm intrigued. I haven't read too many thrillers, and I hear that the YA thrillers are a little softer than the adult thrillers, so maybe this will be a good thriller for me to start with in that genre. Let me know if you've read this. I know that everyone on booktube has already read this, and I'm curious if you've read adult versus YA thrillers, if there is a difference in the thrillerness of the book, and if these YA thrillers are actually a little softer than the adult ones. The next book is by another popular author. His name is Neil Gaiman, and this book is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. So this is a book about a memory, and I guess it is a bit of a fantastical memory because Neil Gaiman writes about it. I have read his book Good Omens that he wrote with Terry Pratchett, and I enjoyed the writing even though the book was a little bit too drawn out for me. This one is a lot shorter, so I'm hoping it'll get to the point a little faster and that I'll still enjoy the writing. I've heard really good things about this one, so I'm really intrigued to get a book that is purely by Neil Gaiman. The next book is another fantasy novel in the YA area, and that is The Bone Charmer by Brianna Shields. Now I haven't heard too much about this on booktube, and perhaps I'm just not watching the channels that have perhaps talked about this book, but I found this while browsing Goodreads and it seemed like a really interesting series. I know the second one in this series is coming out this year, so I wanted to get my hands on the first one and check out to see what it was all about. As you've seen in my previous haul, I really do love books that have to do with bone magic for some reason. I love that spiritual element it brings, and I think this one will also have that same element in the book. In this book, the main character apparently doesn't want to be a bone charmer and doesn't want to have the same career as I think her mother. So she sees two potential choices in front of her: to run away from magic or to stick with her bone charming magic. And I am not sure what happens. I haven't read the full synopsis, so I'm really intrigued to see how this goes. I'm hoping that she'll choose magic because that will make this story a lot more interesting, but we'll see. I'm excited. I love that bone magic kind of vibe. This next book I actually discovered from Books with Chloe's channel, and it really intrigued me mostly because it had a seemingly more feminist approach, and it is called The Mercies by Karan Hargrave. Now, this is a story about a remote island in Norway, and I believe it ends up being run just by women, but then someone kind of comes to the island and turns it all around. I know this is a fantasy novel. I'm not sure if it's YA or not, but it just seems super, super intriguing, and the cover is stunning. I absolutely love it, and I don't care if I'm judging a book by its cover, but it is just too beautiful not to read. I've heard and I've read decent things about this one, so I'm kind of hoping that I'll enjoy it as well. So this next book I have seen a little bit around booktube, but I discovered it on Hardback Hoarder's channel. She initially talked about it and I just became super intrigued. I think it's based on Japanese folklore, and I've always kind of loved their folklore. It is usually pretty dark, very spiritual, really interesting, and that is called The Seven Deadly Shadows. Now, this synopsis is a little bit more complicated. It is based largely on the Japanese folklore, and I suggest that if you really enjoy Japanese folklore and magics that you go check it out on Goodreads. But from what I gather, our main character really loves spending time at her grandfather's shrine where she is training to become a priestess, but the world is starting to be attacked by demons, so she has to gather a band of death gods to help her fight off the demons and fight off the unimaginable evil that is coming to their world. But along the way, she ends up discovering some things about the death gods that are not so good. So I think this one will be a little more complex than any of the other YA fantasy novels that I've read. It sounds really complex. The last book is actually a graphic novel called Monstrous. I discovered this on another Booktubers channel. I can't remember her name, but if I find her account, I will link her down below. She was raving about this series and I thought I would give it a shot. Now, I actually ordered the first 3 copies, but only the first one came in, which is totally fine. And the next 2 should be coming in a few weeks. The artwork is actually dark and it's really beautiful. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but I am really loving the aesthetic and I'm really loving the detail that's been put into the work. But I just love that dark aesthetic. I'm not 100% sure what Monstrous is about. I didn't want to go too into it, and I'm sure I've watched videos about what it's about, but I just don't want to know exactly what I'm gonna get myself into. Just like with Saga, I read the first volume, had no idea what it's about, and I am still figuring out its plot. So that is part 2 and the final part of this book haul. I have actually ordered more books, but they have not come in, so there might be a 3rd segment to this book haul, just not right now. So stay tuned if you love book hauls. There's definitely more coming up, and if you liked this video and you haven't seen part 1, please check it out. I'll link it down below, and I'll link some more of my videos down below for you to check out too. And if you liked this and my other videos, please subscribe and press the like button. It really helps support my channel. Thank you.
So